All right, welcome back. This is the Escape course with Dr. VG. We are on lesson 3. We're talking about bias this week, and we actually have a lot to talk about. So let's hop to it. Okay, moving on, we have a new set of terms. We have culture. And we're talking about the way of life of a group of people. Now, some of these things, when you're looking at this, we have culture, ethnicity, race, class, integration, and assimilation. A lot of these, now I spoke a while back previously about concepts and words and terms that might be we might misuse them. That happens, all right? And it's not that in itself is not a bad thing because we might do it naively. We just might not know what that word actually means, might not understand how it's truly applied in context. That's okay, and that's why I cover these terms specifically inside of the course. Because like some of these ones, the first one, culture and ethnicity, sometimes they're hard to identify. The way of life of a group of people, ethnicity, a group of people classified by recognizable characteristics. So let's talk about those briefly. I'll just give examples for all intents and purposes. So culture, I have a friend who grew up out in St. Thomas, all right, out there in the Virgin Islands. So he grew up in a culture. I mean, you have like a Caribbean culture. I mean, they have various art forms. They could have various beliefs. They may have various customs. There are various things that go into living on an island. So now my friend lives out in Hawaii because, I mean, he was here on mainland United States for a while, but he likes living on an island because that's where he grew up. And that's a great thing. I mean, there's a different mindset that goes into living on a place that's kind of isolated. You have ocean surrounding you, as opposed to living in a place like where I live, outside of Madison, Wisconsin. So, I mean, here in Madison, Wisconsin, the city kind of sits on an isthmus. So there are two big lakes surrounding it, bordering it. So it almost has an effect. I believe someone mentioned it at some point. It's almost like a force shield. This region can affect weather locally in some way. And at least that's how it was explained to me in the past. So there are a lot of things that I don't have to worry about here. We're relatively mild weather. I mean, it just does. We kind of live in a bubble in this particular place. And I just happen to live in a bubble within a bubble. And it's nice because you don't have to worry about a lot of the things that you might see going on in the rest of the country. And those are things that you don't even necessarily have to worry about, or you might have to worry about if you're on an island. I mean, waves. I mean, you have to worry about the ocean there. Waves can come in, tsunamis can come in. That could be the end of things. I mean, I don't ever have to worry about that here in Madison, Wisconsin. We don't really sit on a fault zone that I know of. There's some major thing out there, but near the lakes. But for all intents and purposes, it's just mild. So the way that we live here is different than the way that my friend had to grow up living on an island. Because of the culture around it. We have the Amish. The Amish are out here. I'm not Amish. I just know what I know from people who've spoken to people who might have been Amish. I mean, they have their own governance systems. They might even, I mean, they're based on Christianity, but they have their own beliefs. They live, for all intents and purposes, separated. They might have a different view of technology. Man, my household is, I mean, this is like a technology haven. We have all kinds of technology. I mean, it's what I do. We have talking machines and computers in this place. My kids grew up enmeshed with AI that they saw their father conversing with. It was just kind of natural for them. I mean, that's how they grew up. They grew up with entities that had faces on machines, on screens, and that would, from time to time, speak or even call out for someone. That's living with Doc V. Right? That's living how we lived here. But I don't necessarily think that, I mean, that might not be how the Amish handle things. Whereas ethnicity, you're looking at, you might say Arab, right? I mean, you could see a racial component to it. You could, but if you're an Arab, there might be Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Iraq. You have people there who look, that could look completely different. Lots of differentiation in the pigment of their skins, but the cuisines could be similar, their dress could be similar, the environment in which they live, more desert-based, could be similar. So that ethnicity could define a group of people on a larger space. Outside of that, you have Latino and Hispanic. Now, I mean, that's one of the things that I could say I screwed up on. I didn't necessarily understand the difference between what Latina is and Hispanic. That's something that came up inside of our classes. Faculty would ask, what's the difference? And it just so happened that the therapist that I did this with, she was a Latina. And so she explained it. I mean, that was great because you don't always know. Latino mostly from Latin American countries, whereas Hispanic was mostly thought of as Mexican for all intents and purposes, or somewhere in that region. And we've sometimes used the terms interchangeably when there are subtle differences to them. And what I am going to say is, as you go about life, I guess, and you are Latino or Hispanic, don't take offense. I mean, if someone gets it wrong, because not everybody understands. Questions, communication is what we need to clarify some of these things. I mean, I've had people ask me, should I refer to you as Black or African American? And that was an honest question. I mean, because we're sitting in this class and we're talking about race and we're talking about sexism and sexual harassment and ageism. We're covering all kinds of things, and but I felt self-conscious. I didn't want to call you a black man because I didn't exactly, what? Okay, I guess maybe there might be, okay. And I understood why they asked, because they simply didn't want to offend me. And I could think of nothing more honorable than thinking about my feelings. And what they did was what I proposed. Ask! That's all! I mean, you're just asking. Ask a question. Should I call you a black man or African American? If I had to refer to you in such a thing. I don't care. Personally, I mean, as I said before, I'm considered black. I consider myself black, but I am most certainly brown. I mean, look at it. I'm brown. My desk here is darker brown than I am. My dad is a significant shade darker than I am. My children, being mixed, they're significantly lighter than I am. But what you do, how you do it, how you address people, understanding what their ethnicity and culture comes from, that's cool. I mean, ask the question. Because I asked question of faculty when I was inside of that seminar, and it was actually hard to answer. So I asked, what question did I ask that was hard to answer? So we're talking about, these are faculty members, lots of PhDs, master's degrees, graduate schools. These are experts in their field. Bunch of scientists, biologists, surgeons, police department captains. I mean, there are all kinds of people who teach at my particular college. All right. So people from all walks of life. What I can say is this. We are predominantly and have been for, most of the time our school has been in existence, predominantly white staff and faculty. All right. So that was something I asked. I asked because I didn't know. I mean, it just didn't come across. What I asked to my white faculty, what would be your ethnicity? And people had a hard time answering that. What is a white ethnicity? How about this? What's your culture? What's your white culture? They didn't really know how to answer. As again, I say I'm in a mixed, I had mixed marriages. I couldn't define, my spouses couldn't define. I have friends who really have a hard time defining. So let's do it this way. We have, out in Madison, we have this, what do you call this thing? In the summertime, it was, I don't know if we'll ever have this again. We had this thing called the Taste of Madison. I think that might be over. I don't know. We just have to see how life handles things. But the Taste of Madison, they have all these booths, and everybody goes out. A lot of the farmers in the area bring their wares in. Lots of restaurants. I think we had a lot of restaurants per capita here in this place. Lots of cuisines, lots of ethnic food. And that's what it was actually defined as. But you saw black ethnic food. I mean, I can go to restaurants and see, what is this? They don't really call it African American cooking. They call it black cooking. I mean, that's what I see. I mean, you see that. I'll talk about that in a second. But what is white cooking? Well, let's go with the black cooking first, because that's easier to deal with. My mom, I talk about my parents and my kids a lot. Just recently, the kids got older, all right? So most of my children are in their 20s now. So they can make their own meals. My son just graduated with his bachelor's degree just recently. I made dinners. I made chili. Favorite meal. I made chili for him, and he was eating it, and it was good, right? Dad knows what he's doing. But a few days later, he was like, "Yeah, I remember that was a good meal. But you really should taste my chili." That's what he said. I was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "Yeah." He said, "Do you add sugar to your chili? You've been eating it for 25 years. Yeah, I add sugar." And he says, maybe you just don't add as much sugar as I do. I'm thinking I'm going to make some chili. I'm going to bring it over to you. And then it was in that moment that I recognized something. I kind of recognized what my mom might have been feeling. Because when you get older, you go out and you get your own family. You do your own thing. You get used to your own cooking. You're cooking from your spouse, so on and so forth. You do all those things. And so my mom, she'll go make tacos. You'd say, how can you screw up on tacos? I'm one of those people. I will brown my ground beef in the pan, take it out, drain it, and then rinse it. Some people out there, they're howling. I know you might be howling, but that's just how I do it. You're like, you're rinsing away all the flavor, man. But that's how I do it, okay? My mom, she doesn't do anything like that. She'll cook it and it's just greasy all the way. Look, Mom, how about this? Take a seat, enjoy your family coming to visit you. Throw down with some Connect 4 or sequence or code names with the kids, and I'll do the cooking for you. I feel so bad. I feel so bad because I'm used to cooking for myself. I've been used to what my spouse did with regards to cooking. So, when I was growing up, the reason I talk about this, I'm talking about ethnic food, chitlins. I don't even know if I'm saying the word right. Pig intestine. Never, not once ever did my parents make that for me. I think, who was this? Either Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle. They were talking about this particular thing. And they did some skit. Anybody with fried chicken? Who hates people with fried chicken? They said anybody who says they don't like fried chicken, I think there's something wrong with them. And I agree. How do you mess up on fried chicken? I do it. My daughter calls me an expert at it. She calls it crispy chicken. Dad knows how to do it. Mom does not. So she comes to me to make these things. I make all these pieces. I put them in the freezer. She pulls them out and throw it in the air fryer. Everybody's happy. There, you can say fried chicken. Maybe you can call that a Southern dish. Maybe that's a Southern cultural dish. My parents like collard greens. Don't like that either. So if my mom were to make chitlins and collard greens, count me out. I'm not going to come visit today. I'm just not going to. Or I might bring my own food. I've done that before. So you couldn't just look at me as a black man and say, you eat chitlins and collard greens. I do not. I simply don't. And can't stand them. But that's just me. So we can't always look at a person and just believe that they belong to some type of ethnic group. For all that matter, religious things, I don't practice Kwanzaa either. I just don't. There are things that I just don't do. I was raised slightly different. I was actually raised in a religious household. So that's that's how I form myself. So nevertheless, you have that, and I go back to what we're talking about with white culture and ethnicity. How do you define that? And somebody said, I don't know. I define it as American. And that I find fascinating. Fascinating because that's something that people have always brought up. We always look at it, and it always comes up in these kind of seminars, and how there's a collective consciousness that white America is defined as American, and black American might be defined as some type of ethnic group or culture, but the white one is more defined as American. And I've known people who are German. They have their own ethnic foods. They have their own ethnic practices. The thing that you do, Oktoberfest, right? I have lots of people out here in Wisconsin who practice Oktoberfest in some way. There are lots of Finnish, Swedish people here who have their own ideas, their own food, so on and so forth. So there are various things like that, but I was talking white American. And you couldn't go to a restaurant and see that listed anywhere. What you would see is American food. And when you see American food, it will list this. And it will say macaroni and cheese, hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza. People say, that's Italian. No, it's not. That's for all intents and purposes an American thing. Even tacos. The way we kind of eat tacos and form them here, you would think that might be Hispanic, but it might be based upon it. But Americans have their own kind of version of what tacos are. So you do have those types of things. And I said, well, what else? You would say that, but we don't really call that white American. I've seen it referred to as American itself. And so there was something else that someone brought up. And I found this even more fascinating. So what did they bring up? Baseball and amusement parks. Now, I found that indeed fascinating. Wow! Amusement parks. We have that here, and that's especially amusement parks because they're so expensive. You're looking at hundreds of dollars a day that for you to go sit in a place. And what do you actually do in the amusement parks? When you think about it, we went back and forth and dissecting it. You spend a lot of time, and yes, there are amusement parks across the world. That's true, but it almost seems like something that we here in America exported. We go there to experience the thrill of death. Really. It's a thrill that you feel in your gut when you go to the top of this thing, this roller coaster, and you can see across the horizon just as it and it rolls over, and it typically just hangs there and then it drops, and you go down there and you feel the thrill of falling to your death. And we pay money for that here because we don't necessarily fear walking to school. We don't necessarily fear here the sound of drones in the distance. We don't have that concern. So in some ways we need to buy, I don't want to say we buy the fear of death, but there's a weird psychology that's associated with some of that. And that was one of the things, the attributes that people were talking about where it's kind of uniquely American, but we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it in a white culture kind of way. The white culture or ethnicity really is kind of, there isn't one to some degree. I encourage you to think about that on your own. If you could, if you so choose to do so, talk with somebody else and ask what their opinion is. I'm always open to understanding things. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. Class, all right? That was something we talked about in our course. Should we talk about class as opposed to race as much as we do? Because racism does exist, but classism exists as well, especially in our society. Okay, you can have all kinds of. We have different levels. Inequality is huge, and a lot of the things that we run into, sexism and ageism and racism, you can see them emerge with a ferocity when there is a large disparity, when people are suffering, when they're hungry, when they're out of work. A lot of our problems amplify. When times are good, a lot of those problems are depressed. All right, maybe we are overlooking them because, times are good. I'm at park, I'm doing my stuff, I'm driving my big car. I'm not worried about those people over there because I got what I got. Class is a big thing, especially in this society. I'll talk more about that, I believe, in another lesson. Integration and assimilation. Assembly of different components into a whole, merging or melting. Yeah! There was a show. Schoolhouse Rock. I grew up in the 70s watching Schoolhouse Rock on a Saturday morning. And one of those things was the Great American Melting Pot. It was like a little song, a little ditty thing they had like during a commercial. It was kind of like a commercial, but it was an educational thing. They had multiplication facts and history and science. I liked Schoolhouse Rock. We have a DVD of the things downstairs. But we were raised, we were taught that America is a melting pot, right? We all come here to the country and we mix, we merge. We all learn English. We're fighting over that nowadays. We are. We all learn English. We've given up the languages that we had in our previous world. Or maybe you speak them on your own at home, but you're going to learn the one that's spoken here because we all merge. Not everybody likes that idea. They think more of it's not a melting pot, but more a salad, right? I mean, you can see a tomato inside a salad. You can see different types of lettuce inside of a salad. You can see pieces of cucumber, but they're all merged together in this thing to be consumed as a whole. But there are separate, clearly identifiable pieces to it, as opposed to the melting pot. I don't see the tomato, I don't see the lettuce, I taste it. I do, but they aren't distinct. And so we do have that distinction. There's a difference of perspective on what we are, how we want to define ourselves in this country. Are we an assimilated melting pot, or are we a nation of individualized entities? I don't know, Little Italy, Little China, Little Tokyo, native areas, black areas. I mean, are we separate, but then still hoisting up the flag together? Or are we merged together? I mean, again, different point of view. I know my sons, I mean, that's one thing I can say that I liked about the military is that they chose to, in a way, erase the individualism that existed for us. So we came in there, black, brown, whatever, white, red, whatever color you think you are. We came in that way and came out Marine Corps green. That's how they called it. That's how they saw it. The whole purpose of that assimilation was to build cohesiveness. It was to build camaraderie. It was to tear down barriers that we might have put in place, or that society might have put in place for us, and view ourselves as a thing, as a whole. That did work, but you have to remember, it worked. And one of the reasons why it worked is because I volunteered for that. We live in a nation where we have a professional military, and protective services are the same way in many regards, where we volunteer for it. We do have a draft, but we don't really use it, not anymore. But we volunteer for that life. In many ways, military life is social. Shoot, it's as close to socialism as we can get. Somebody would take great offense to this. Oh yeah, I know. I've had many discussions on this one. We tear it up. It almost gets to fight because it does. Because we're hardcore military. We're doggone here to push out democracy. We're no Reds. That's what we called communism and socialism. But to be honest with you, that military is a large functioning and well-honed socialist system for all intents and purposes. It is. We exist for each other, for the whole. Right? I mean, everything's given to us. We're just there to do and live as a unit, as our society of military people. I say, think about it, talk about it, fight it out with somebody else. Don't fight it out with me. That's been my perspective, and we've had, again, many conversations on that. But again, you volunteer for that, and not everybody does. I mean, they're saying that the military castes in this country, it's kind of what it's like. Maybe 2% of the population serves? We're actually small. So not everybody does this. Not everybody believes it. There is a time and a place for it. And that's okay.